Let's now get some more analysis from Graham Phillips, who is a journalist based in Ukraine. Graham, thank you so much for joining us here on RT. Well, you've been covering this ongoing turmoil for quite some time now. At this point, we know that the West has introduced sanctions against the Ukraine's government, but leadership, I should say. But what about the violence by the opposition? Why is it being ignored?
In terms of that, you have to look at who's reporting the actual actions taking place in Kiev. It's coming filtered through the prism of organizations such as Svoboda, Radio Svoboda, the Ukrainsky Pravda, and I would even put the Kiev Post. And really their objectivity is completely compromised by the fact that they're effectively opposition activist organs. And they're functioning in that way, and they're reporting the news to that end. So we're really getting the news filtered through the opposition's lens, and that's how it's been reported to the wider world.
So what is the driving force of the unrest, in your opinion, from your standpoint?
The driving force is clear. It's fundamental, far-right, extremist, neo-Nazi politics. Everyone knew that when Svoboda achieved around 10% of the vote in the October 2012 election, there were going to be repercussions, and it didn't take long. And this has been in the offing for a long time. And if you notice now, no one is even talking about the association agreement. In fact, no one's even talking about Tymoshenko's release from prison, which were supposedly the touch papers which lit this up. This was really orchestrated from the beginning. And in fact, if you go into occupied City Hall now, you see Svoboda's flags, Svoboda's banners flying bedecked across the building. So make no mistake, this is an attempt by a party strongly linked with far-right neo-Nazi politics to overthrow the Ukrainian government.
Well, you know, now that you mentioned that, I mean, we can see that nationalist groups are gaining momentum there. I mean, there are so many different factions there, and we're hearing that, you know, that specific nationalist group is, in fact, you know, gaining prominence there. So why is the international community ignoring this, and how much longer can their activities go unnoticed?
I was stunned. I was at Grushevskovo on Sunday, and I saw guys lining up with fusillades of missiles and Molotov cocktails and knives and weapons of every single manner, attacking police in every way they could. And I returned from that and was then on the internet checking the news, and it was being reported immediately that the US has introduced sanctions against the Ukrainian government. The Ukrainian police and government have been criticised, but to be there on the ground, it's absurd to reconcile that with what you're seeing, which is highly militarised. And in fact, I've been in City Hall just before preceding events. And these guys were getting militarised, they were getting mobilised, they were getting ready to go into war. They knew exactly, they were receiving briefings, they were receiving instructions on that basis of going into war. They went in on that basis and they went to that end to effectively instigate a civil war in Ukraine. And I think you would really be tendentious to say that what we have at the moment isn't a degree of civil war in Ukraine.
Well, and finally, let me just ask you a quick question here. I mean, looking at the opposition and one of its frontmen, Vitaly Klitschko, who's been earlier calling for an outright offensive, and when we asked him on camera, I mean, he softened his stance. So, saying that he will do his best to keep the protest peaceful. Why such a sudden change of heart? Briefly, if you could.
I mean, Klitschko is a decent individual, essentially. However, in this, he's simply being malused by those who are more adroit and more adept, and exploiting the fact that he is perhaps not necessarily the most intelligent of characters. What you've got now is a real drive to overthrow the government very soon by Batkivshina, led by Yatsenyuk, because he knows that if Tymoshenko is released, then his tenure as caretaker leader of that party is over. And you've got Chanibok, who believes that if they push now, and let's remember that in any case, an election for a new president of Ukraine is only a year away. You've got two parties who have a huge interest, which is Batkivshina and Svoboda, who've effectively allied, who push for that election now, and they believe that in that case, they can effectively position their man, be it Yatsenyuk or most likely Oleg Chanibok, as the president of Ukraine. Klitschko simply doesn't see what's going on. And as for Yatsenyuk, he's coming out with these statements such as we need to go to the front lines, and if it's a bullet in the head, so be it. Well, I saw him at Grushevskovo on Sunday when tear gas was going off, and I've never seen a man run so fast in my life. So these are effectively very bold words from Oleg Chanibok, who's telling his followers on Twitter that it's revolution, it's time to overthrow the government, but they're effectively putting the bodies of these fundamentalists on the front line, and these guys are undereducated. They are
well, certainly, as we can see, Graham, there's a long tug of war going on at the moment there. But for the moment, thank you so much for bringing us your views here on RT International. That was Graham Phillips, the journalist based in Ukraine.